Sergeant, sometimes sergeant, is a rank used in many armies, police forces, and other uniformed organizations. Its origins are in the Latin serviens, one who serves, through the French term sergeant. In most armies the rank of sergeant corresponds to command of a squad. In Commonwealth armies, it is a more senior rank, corresponding roughly to a platoon second in command. In the United States Army, sergeant is a more junior rank, corresponding to a four-man fireteam leader. More senior non-commissioned ranks are often variations on sergeant, for example staff sergeant, first sergeant and sergeant major. Many countries use the rank of sergeant, whether in English or using a cognate with the same origin in another language. The equivalent rank in Arab armies is rakib, meaning overseer or watcher. Usage in most non-naval military or paramilitary organizations. The various grades of sergeant are non-commissioned officers ranking above privates and corporals, and below warrant officers and commissioned officers. The responsibilities of a sergeant differ from army to army. There are usually several ranks of sergeant, each corresponding to greater experience and responsibility for the daily lives of the soldiers of larger units. In medieval European usage, a sergeant was simply any attendant or officer with a protective duty. Any medieval knight or military order of knighthood might have sergeants at arms, meaning servants able to fight if needed. The etymology of the term is from Anglo-French sergeant, sergeant, servant, valet, court official, soldier, from Middle Latin servientum, servant, vassal, soldier. Australia. Defence Force sergeant is a rank in both the Australian Army and the Royal Australian Air Force. The ranks are equivalent to each other and the Royal Australian Navy rank of petty officer, although the rank insignia of the RAF rank of flight sergeant and the Australian Army rank of staff sergeant are identical. Flight sergeant in fact outranks the rank of staff sergeant in the classification of rank equivalencies. The Australian Army rank of staff sergeant is now redundant and is no longer awarded, due to being outside the rank equivalencies, and the next promotional rank is Warrant Officer Class 2. The ranks of Chief Petty Officer, Warrant Officer Class 2 and Flight Sergeant fall in line with US E8. Chief Petty Officers and Flight Sergeants are not required to call a Warrant Officer Class 2, Sir, in accordance with Australian Defence Force Regulations 1952. Police. The rank of sergeant exists in all Australian police forces and is more senior than a constable or sub-constable, but less senior than an inspector. There are generally two sergeant ranks that are classed as non-commissioned officers, sergeant, and senior sergeant. Some state police forces have slightly different variations of the sergeant structure. New South Wales Police Force, for example, has the additional rank of incremental sergeant. This is an incremental progression, following appointment as a sergeant for 7 years. An incremental sergeant rank is lesser than a senior sergeant but is more senior than a sergeant. Upon appointment as a sergeant or senior sergeant, the sergeant is given a warrant of appointment under the commissioner's hand and seal. In addition, the sergeant is given a navy blue backing, a navy blue nameplate, and a silver chin strap positioned above his peaked cap on his headdress, replacing a black chin strap. Within the NSWPF, sergeant is a team leader or supervisory rank, whilst the rank of senior sergeant is a middle management rank with coordination responsibilities over human and physical resources. South Australia Police has the additional rank of brevet sergeant, which is an authorization for a temporarily higher rank. A brevet sergeant is less senior than a sergeant. All three sergeant ranks are informally referred to as sergeant, boss, or sarge. However, at the New South Wales Police Academy, recruits must address all ranks of sergeants as sergeant, and senior sergeant as senior sergeant. Sergeants are usually team leaders in charge of an entire team of constables, to senior constables at large stations, to being in charge of sectors involving several police stations. In country areas, sergeants are often in charge of an entire station and its constabulary. Senior sergeants are usually in specialist areas and are in charge of sergeants and thus act as middle management. Canada. Canadian Army Sergeant is an Army or Air Force non-commissioned officer rank of the Canadian Armed Forces. Its naval equivalent is Petty Officer Second Class. It is senior to the appointment of Master Corporal and its equivalent naval appointment, Master Seaman, and junior to Warrant Officer and its naval equivalent, Petty Officer First Class. Sergeants and petty officers second class together make up the lowest of 4 grades in the cadre of senior non-commissioned officers. In Army units, sergeants usually serve as section commanders. They may often be called to fill positions normally held by warrant officers, such as platoon or troop warrant, company quartermaster sergeant, chief clerk, etc. The rank insignia of a sergeant is a 3-bar chevron, worn point down, surmounted by a maple leaf. Embroidered rank badges are worn in CF gold thread on rifle green Melton, stitched to the upper sleeves of the service dress jacket, as miniature gold metal and rifle green enamel badges on the collars of the Army dress shirt and Army outerwear jackets, in old gold thread on Air Force blue slip-ons on Air Force shirts, sweaters, and coats, and in tan thread on CADPAT slip-ons or dark blue thread on olive drab slip-ons on the operational dress uniform. Color sergeant in the Canadian Armed Forces is not a rank of sergeant, but a warrant officer in one of the 2-foot Guards regiments. Likewise, a sergeant major is not a sergeant rank, but an appointment held by a master warrant officer or chief warrant officer. Sergeants generally mess and billet with warrant officers, master warrant officers, and chief warrant officers, and the naval counterparts, chief petty officers and petty officers. Their mess on military bases or installations is generally named the warrant officers and sergeants' mess. Historically, the rank of sergeant was severely downgraded after unification of the 3 services in 1968. An Army sergeant before unification was generally employed in supervisory positions, such as the second-in-command of a platoon-sized unit. After unification, sergeants were downgraded in status to section commander, a job previously held by corporals, and the former platoon troop sergeants were replaced by platoon troop warrant officers. Police forces across Canada also use the rank of sergeant and staff sergeant for senior non-commissioned officers above the rank of constable or corporal, except in the province of Quebec and in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. The insignia for a police sergeant is a 3 chevrons, worn point down. Staff sergeants rank above sergeants and are responsible for a unit or team within a station or division. The insignia for a staff sergeant is 3 chevrons, worn point down, surmounted by a royal crown. In the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the insignia for a sergeant is 3 chevrons, worn point down, surmounted by a royal crown. The insignia of a staff sergeant in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police is 4 chevrons, worn point up. Finland. Army Kursantti is in Finnish Defence Forces the second and highest non-commissioned officer rank that a conscript can possibly reach before entering the reserve. The beginning and most common non-commissioned officer rank is a Kursantti, Sea Corporal. Only a few non-commissioned officers in each conscript company reach the higher rank of full 3 chevron Kursantti. There's no difference between the 4-month squad leader training and service time of the Kursantti and Kursantti. All start their squad leader tour with the lower rank, and the optional promotion is based on superiors' assessment of individual performance and intended duties in the wartime organization. Special roles such as that of platoon sergeant or company first sergeant are typically reserved for Kursantti and upwards. A corporal can also obtain the rank of sergeant by taking some military refresher courses while in reserve, or by enlisting to professional service in the military. France. Army French sergeant ranks are used by the Air Force, engineers, infantry, Foreign Legion, troops de marine, communications, administrative service, and Gendarmerie Mobile. Other branches of the army and gendarmerie use the equivalent ranks of Maréchal des Logis instead of sergeant ranks. There were 3 sergeant ranks in France, although the most junior, contract sergeant, has been superseded by student sub-officer now that conscription has been suspended. When the army contained a large proportion of conscripts, contract sergeant was very common as a rank for conscripts considered to have leadership potential. In general, the term sergeant was used for both contract sergeant and career sergeant. Contract sergeant was classified as the lowest sub-officer rank, the rank below being chief corporal. Student sub-officer, élève sous-officier, 1 chevron, gold or silver. Contract sergeant was a rank used for junior sergeants, either conscripts or reservists. The rank insignia is used nowadays for students. After a certain amount of time, a student sub-officer is entitled to be addressed sergeant, sergeant, sergeant. 2 chevrons. Normal sergeant rank, though normally directly recruited from civilian life into the sub-officer ranks, so the rank implies less experience and higher academic requirements than for a Commonwealth sergeant. As a typical rank for the command of a squad, this rank is roughly equivalent to a Commonwealth corporal or a U.S. staff sergeant. Principal sergeant, sergeant-chef, 3 chevrons. With long service, a sergeant's promotion to chief sergeant is automatic, typically being a platoon second in command. The holder of this rank is therefore equivalent to a Commonwealth sergeant or a U.S. sergeant first class. The next rank up is adjutant. Germany. Army. In modern-day usage within the German Bundeswehr, the rank of sergeant is known as Unteroffizier. Historically, it was the German army rank of a corporal. The rank has existed since the 18th century, with usage as a title dating back to the Middle Age. The ranks of the Unteroffizier are divided into 2 categories. The Unteroffizier ohne Portier making up the cadre of junior non-commissioned officers, and the Unteroffizier mit Portier making up the cadre of senior non-commissioned officers. The duties of a sergeant Unteroffizier can vary greatly with its rank. In a typical Bundeswehr company, the Unteroffizier ohne Portier are only leading 1 Zugtrupp, whereas the position of Zugführer are held by a higher-ranked NCOs with according training. The platoon's second in command is usually held by Feldwebel, Oberfeldwebel. The German army rank order is Unteroffizier or 5, Fahnenjunker or 5, Stabsunteroffizier or 5, Feldwebel or 6, Fahnenrich or 6, Oberfeldwebel or 6, Hauptfeldwebel or 7, Oberfähnrich or 7, Stabsfeldwebel or 8 and Oberstabsfeldwebel or 9. Navy Mart is a naval rank of the German Navy equivalent to the Army rank of Unteroffizier. A Mart is considered the equivalent of a junior petty officer in the navies of many other nations. The term is derived from the Low German Mat. Via the Dutch language, the word became a nautical term and described the assistant to a deck officer. Since the second half of the 17th century, Marti were the lowest class of non-commissioned officers aboard a warship. The German Navy rank order is Mart or 5, Sea Cadet or 5, Obermart or 5, Bootsman or 6, Fahnenrich or 6, Oberbootsman or 6, Hauptbootsman or 7, Oberfähnrich or 7, Stabsbootsman or 8 and Oberstabsbootsman or 9. Hellas. Army Sigma Tau Rho Alpha Tau Omicron Sigma Xi Eta Rho Alpha Sigma. The Hellenic Army rank order is Sigma Tau Rho Alpha Tau Iota Omega Tau Eta Sigma, Upsilon Pi Omicron Delta Epsilon Kappa Alpha Nu Epsilon Alpha Sigma, Delta Epsilon Kappa Alpha Nu Epsilon Alpha Sigma, Lambda Omicron Chi Iota Alpha Sigma, Epsilon Pi Iota Lambda Omicron Chi Iota Alpha Sigma, Alpha Rho Chi Iota Lambda Omicron Chi Iota Alpha Sigma, Alpha Nu Theta Epsilon Pi Alpha Sigma, sigma pi iota sigma tau eta sigma, alpha nu theta epsilon pi omicron lambda omicron chi alpha gamma omicron sigma, epsilon pi omicron lambda omicron chi alpha gamma omicron sigma, lambda omicron chi alpha gamma omicron sigma, tau alpha gamma mu alpha tau alpha rho chi eta sigma, alpha nu tau iota sigma epsilon nu tau alpha gamma mu alpha tau alpha rho chi eta sigma, sigma epsilon nu tau alpha gamma mu alpha tau alpha rho chi eta sigma, tau alpha chi iota alpha rho k omicron sigma, epsilon pi omicron sigma tau rho alpha tau eta gamma omicron sigma, alpha nu tau iota sigma tau rho alpha tau eta gamma omicron sigma, sigma tau rho alpha tau eta gamma omicron sigma, sigma tau rho alpha tau alpha rho chi eta sigma, air force by omicron lambda epsilon mu iota kappa eta alpha epsilon rho omicron pi omicron rho iota alpha. The Hellenic Air Force rank order is sigma mu eta nu iota tau eta sigma, epsilon pi omicron sigma mu eta nu iota alpha sigma, kappa lambda eta rho omega tau omicron sigma, sigma mu eta nu iota alpha sigma, epsilon pi iota sigma mu eta nu iota alpha sigma, alpha rho chi iota sigma mu eta nu iota alpha sigma, alpha nu theta epsilon pi alpha sigma pi iota sigma tau eta sigma, alpha nu theta epsilon pi omicron sigma mu eta nu alpha gamma omicron sigma, epsilon pi omicron sigma mu eta nu alpha gamma omicron sigma, sigma mu eta nu alpha gamma omicron sigma, epsilon pi iota sigma mu eta nu alpha gamma omicron sigma, alpha nu tau iota sigma mu eta nu alpha rho k omicron sigma, sigma mu eta nu alpha rho k omicron sigma, tau alpha chi iota alpha rho k omicron sigma, epsilon pi omicron pi tau epsilon rho alpha rho k omicron sigma, alpha tau iota pi tau epsilon rho alpha rho k omicron sigma, pi tau epsilon rho alpha rho k omicron sigma, navy pi omicron lambda epsilon mu iota kappa omicron nu alpha epsilon tau iota kappa omicron. The Hellenic Navy rank order is nu alpha epsilon tau eta sigma, delta iota omicron pi omicron sigma, kappa epsilon lambda epsilon epsilon sigma tau eta sigma, epsilon pi iota kappa epsilon lambda epsilon epsilon sigma tau eta sigma, alpha rho chi iota kappa epsilon lambda epsilon epsilon sigma tau eta sigma, alpha nu theta epsilon pi alpha sigma pi iota sigma tau eta sigma, alpha nu theta epsilon pi omicron pi lambda omicron iota alpha rho k omicron sigma, epsilon pi omicron pi lambda omicron iota alpha rho k omicron sigma, pi lambda omega tau alpha rho chi eta sigma, alpha nu tau iota pi lambda omicron iota alpha rho k omicron sigma, pi lambda omicron iota alpha rho k omicron sigma, alpha rho chi iota pi lambda omicron iota alpha rho k omicron sigma, epsilon pi omicron nu alpha epsilon alpha rho k omicron sigma, alpha nu tau iota nu alpha epsilon rho k omicron sigma, nu alpha epsilon alpha rho k omicron sigma. Hong Kong Army and Air Force. During British rule, the rank of sergeant was held by members of the RAF, or British Army serving in Hong Kong. The rank was held by local enlisted men with the Royal Hong Kong Regiment and Royal Hong Kong Regiment. Regimental Police. Hong Kong Police Force sergeants are in charge of a section or commander of a vehicle on patrol. Their ranks is symbolized by 3 chevrons and worn on their arm in or lapel. The rank is also used by the Hong Kong Auxiliary Police Force and sergeant. There are also sergeants in the Hong Kong Police Force Pipe Band, who carry their rank from their regular policing duties. Two other non-military organizations use the ranks of sergeant. Hong Kong Air Cadet Corps Sergeant Instructor Cadet Sergeant. Hong Kong Adventure Corps also used the rank of sergeant. Staff Sergeant Sergeant Cadet Staff Sergeant Cadet Sergeant. India and Pakistan. Police in many metropolitan police forces in both India and Pakistan. A sergeant is equivalent to a police sub-inspector. They are subordinate to police inspectors in rank, but are senior to assistant sub-inspectors, head constables, nation police constables in Indian police forces. In British India days, the practice began of transferring British Army NCOs to Indian constabularies to teach him foot and rifle drill and weapons handling and to maintain disciplinary standards. This is the historical origin of the rank of sergeant in the forces of today's Mumbai, Chennai and Kolkata. Sergeants have always served in the non-investigative branches of the protective police, e.g., armed and mounted branches, port, river and traffic police, reserve forces, etc., and one per police station. Their use is focused more upon security and public order situations than investigating routine domestic, commercial and street crime, which is the purview of the investigative branches of the detective police, where their counterparts are called sub-inspectors. Head constables wear 3 chevrons point down on their sleeve or 3 bars on their epaulets. Army. In the British Indian Army, the equivalent rank to sergeant was daffadar in cavalry regiments and havildar in other units. These ranks are still used in the armies of India and Pakistan. Air Force. In the Indian Air Force and the Pakistan Air Force, the rank of sergeant is above a corporal and below a junior warrant officer. The rank insignia is a 3-pointed down chevron. The rank of flight sergeant is now obsolete, with the responsibilities given to junior warrant officers. The rank of sergeant is a senior non-commissioned officer. Navy. In the Indian Navy and the Pakistan Navy, the rank of petty officer is roughly equivalent to sergeant. Ireland. Army. Sergeant is the second rank of non-commissioned officer within the Irish Army. The naval equivalent is petty officer. The Army rank insignia consists of 3 winged chevrons. The service dress insignia consists of 3 wavy red chevrons 9 cm wide bordered in yellow. The main infantry role of a sergeant is as second in command of a platoon or commander of a fire support section of a weapons platoon, such as an anti-tank or mortar platoon. Another role is that of company clerk and instructor. There are higher ranks of company sergeant and company quartermaster sergeant. Artillery sergeants are usually assigned as detachment and section commanders, as well as in administrative roles. The difference in roles of sergeant and corporal in the artillery corps is not as clearly defined as in the infantry corps. Sergeant is also the second rank of non-commissioned officer in the Irish Air Corps. Before 1994, the Air Corps was considered part of the Army and wore Army uniforms with distinct corps badges, but the same rank insignia. With the introduction of a unique Air Corps blue uniform in 1994, the same rank markings in a white color were worn. Before the introduction of a new 3 chevron with wing rank marking, there are higher ranks of flight sergeant and flight quartermaster sergeant. Police sergeant is the second rank in the Garda Israel Defense Forces. For further information, see Israel Defense Forces ranks. In the Israel Defense Forces, soldiers are promoted from corporal to sergeant after approximately 18 months of service. If they performed their duties appropriately during this time, and did not have disciplinary problems, soldiers who take a commander's course may become sergeants earlier. Sergeants get a symbolic pay raise of 1.80 nis. Italy. Army. In the Italian Army, the rank of sergeant is the first rank of the warrant officer's sergeant role, equivalent to NATO or 5 grade. The 2 next senior ranks are Sergeant Maggiore and Sergeant Maggiore Capo. For paratroopers, the ranks of Sergeant and Sergeant Maggiore are bordered in blue. Mexico. Army. In the Mexican Army, the is junior to Sargento Segundo and Sargento Primero.